So what's up, YouTube? If you followed this channel for any amount of time, and especially over the last year, you've probably noticed that I pride myself on my ability to be resilient and my ability to adapt to bad situations, and by learning from those situations, I'm able to articulate that to you guys so you can improve as well. That's why I have several series on this channel about teaching the things that I've learned to impart that knowledge upon you, and so that you can have a better perspective of the situations you're in within the game and improve upon those situations from the understanding that I have accrued on my own time. That is especially the case on this channel when it comes to videos I make about UFC. Every now and again I do other types of videos that also gives in-depth analysis, but for the most part that's been my approach to my UFC 3 content, other than the content that was created just sheerly for fun, like the fighter request videos where I'm talking, laughing, and having a good time, and just kind of foregoing any sort of intellectual conversation, but just kind of moving and having a good time with the content. But as of late, you've most likely noticed that I've kind of given up on playing the game as a whole because of a myriad of different reasons of why I don't enjoy the experience. I'm going to attempt to articulate my overarching issues that prevent me from creating the content that I once loved to produce on this channel in my 4+ years of creating content, 3 or 4 of those being mostly exclusive UFC content. I guess I should start at the beginning of my grievance, and in a way that stems from the way developers interact with their games and their community members and just feedback in general. Let me start this conversation off with something that happened a while back in Fortnite. A feature was added that dealt damage to players if the explosive, like an RPG, hit a structure they were inside. The streaming /pro/ content creating community was completely in an uproar because players could just blast the walls of their 1x1 they were hiding in and deal them around, I think it was like 35 damage to the player's health. Now, to me, this seems perfectly reasonable based on the fact that the players are shooting military grade explosives at what, a 10x10 wall. I mean, those rockets could destroy a small village, but I digress on that point. The overall point of what I'm saying is the community got so pissed because of this that in their minds it lowered the skill gap of the game, because players could just shoot explosives at their 1x1 and they got guaranteed damage. This change was literally reverted so fast. It was reverted before I can even get off work to get on the game the same day that the patch went live. And why? Because players didn't feel that there was a reasonable defense against this. They felt that overall it was just too hard to defend against it because you couldn't really get out of the way of it, and it was pretty buggy in its original iteration. The way it often dealt damage to players regardless of where they were in the explosion. Like, they could have been at the far wall instead of at the near wall, and they still took the same amount of damage as if they were close. That's just a glitch to me. And in my opinion, editing out of a 1x1 when you hear an explosive, because they have very, very visceral audio cues. When you hear an explosive, you hear an RPG to your right, it's extremely easy to edit out of that 1x1, build you another 1x1, like tunnel into a different 1x1 to avoid that damage, and close off that wall so that there's 2 or 3 walls between you and the explosive. That's a very reasonable defense, but this could have been further improved upon. This, over time, this could have been improved to where there was less overall explosive weaponry based per match. They could have just lowered the amount of RPGs that load into the match, how amount of RPG ammo, amount of grenades, just lower that overall amount of explosives to where that was more of a rarity to the game, as well as changing the amount of base damage based on the proximity to the impact. That would have helped as well as changing the material type, how much damage it takes based on material. Like brick and metal could take less damage if the explosive is near you, and it would be relative to how close you were to the material, as well as improving how much damage you took based on the health of the material. Because if the material is freshly built, it's not at full health, so you should obviously take more damage. But if it's fully built, you should take less damage because it's a fully built piece. But instead of sticking to their guns and improving upon what they designed, it was completely removed from the game. This is a UFC 3 video, so I'm sure you're thinking, how does that relate? Well, I'm glad you asked, because a similar thing happened to UFC 3 when the game first came out. At launch, UFC 3 tried to fix an age-old MMA gaming problem of head-targeted strikes, intercepting body punches in the game. They even went as far as to add side evasion to some of those body strikes that clearly moved your head off the center line. so that they avoided straight trajectory strikes. To me, this was groundbreaking, giving effective bodywork a mechanical place in the game. But no good deed goes unpunished, as players quickly realized that most players approach with jabs and straights, making them susceptible to the lead hook and lead uppercut to the body. And it was at the most vulnerable part of the strikes animation because of this counter. And in UFC 3, the vulnerability system acts as a tiered damage multiplier that triggers specific amounts and areas of the body based on the actions being used. So with this increase to damage and the way body damage is treated in UFC 3, dealing most of that damage to the overall stamina as opposed to physically damaging the body, which is also brilliant in my mind, because I can speak explicitly to the fact that being punched in the body, although it is a gut punch, it doesn't hurt physically as much as it makes you tired and winded, unless of course your rib is broken. So because of this counter being so easy to access, players did what players do, and they spam these strikes both as counters and as a pressuring tool to chase and drain the other opponent as fast as earthly possible. Now, similar to the way Epic nerfed explosives, the devs nerfed the side evasion to body shots because the players were outraged. Side evasion to the lead body hook and uppercut was completely removed from the game. To me, side evasion should have been added to more things in the game as opposed to being removed. But on this channel, I even put out a video. I analyzed what happened to me when somebody tried to do this to me. I analyzed it and I figured out a reasonable counter, and that counter was very effective and very easy to execute. I put that video up on the channel. It's in my in the lab videos. It's one of the first ones for how to counter that style, and that was a reasonable counter. It was fast, and that video went up as soon as I could so I can try to help the community to learn and adapt to that situation. To me, this was less of a problem that needed such a heavy nerf, but the nerf was still made. And in my head, lowering the damage of the strike and adding more startup frames to the moving version of the strike would have been a practical nerf that would allow for side evasion to stay in the game because it made practical sense, making countering and defending against spammers easy enough to discourage that playstyle. This example speaks to the overall theme of this conversation. Community rage-based nerfs too often force developers to remove intellectual systems and mechanics from games because it's easier and quicker to silence the masses than it is to cohesively work on improving the overall quality of the game. This isn't and wasn't the only time that the community was able to change the game in a way that reduced realism in favor of a video gaming mechanic instead of improving and adding more intellectual based mechanics to the game. Like a change that a content creator advocated for to be added to combination accuracy. With his reach and a straw man argument, the game was changed in a way that allowed for canned combinations to counter head movement, which from launch had too slow a startup frame versus strikes to be used as a reaction like they are in real life. And at the point in the game, they had continued to be nerfed over and over, which further ruined the realistic countering that the game started off with. If these words that I'm using about your favorite YouTuber offended you, I'm sorry, because that's not my intention. I'm only stating the facts as they are. This change was asked for because in real life, fighters can make adjustments to situations they've seen before, but in the context of a video game, the player isn't making an adjustment. The game is autonomously making an adjustment for them to counter the other player's defense. Now, part of that change was to remove the whiff penalty inflicted to players whose strikes were slipped, but in fighting games, recovery needs to be valued in order for there to be a balance between attacking and defending. This entire balance was removed because of this change. This nerf made spamming combinations versus all defenses more viable than intelligent defense. A softer change could have been to reduce the amount of frames at the end of all whiff strikes to be more reasonable to the counter strikes. But since the frame data at the time wasn't released but has since been released, that only further illuminates several problems within the striking of the game. Because now we know that recovering to striking is always slower than recovering to walking or blocking. So this nerf really wasn't needed in the first place because people were only being punished because they were spamming strikes after being slipped instead of blocking or using other intelligent defenses. So in conclusion, UFC 3 at launch was trending to be the most realistic mixed martial arts game ever made, but this trend was spoiled. And it set the precedent for screaming at devs until they made the changes to the design that undermined their original design and were to appease the community and make the community more comfortable, and that took away from the realism that the game was aspiring to create. Now, this has been Brian at the Apex Gamer channel. I wanted to bring you this video to just talk about one overarching theme of why I don't enjoy playing as much, And this was the best way for me to do it, to give you some cohesive narrative to problem number one that stemmed from my dissatisfaction with the game. And that was from, like I said, community rage-based changes forcing the game out of what it was initially intended to be, instead of improving the overall quality through soft balance adjustments, buffs, and nerfs. Instead of that happening, what actually ends up happening is more things get removed from games instead of them getting adjusted, reevaluated, and eventually reiterated into a way that they are more practical and effective, and create the atmosphere that the game developer, who is a paid developer, smarter and more knowledgeable about the situation in most cases than the average player is, and it takes away from their creative vision, and it doesn't give them a chance to flourish and improve upon what was already there, because removing just becomes so much quicker and more responsive because of outrage, because the way people act, the internet culture, and the trend that people have built up to thinking that they have the power to force the hand of developers to make the game they want to make, as opposed to help tailor their feedback in a way that helps to create the best possible experience overall. Now, to some players, the game right now is in the best place it is, but to me, the game, to those players, are in the best place it has been because they wanted it to be the way it is. They wanted to sculpt it the way it was, because the way it was originally didn't make sense to them, and instead of learning the way it was and figuring out the flaws in the way it was to improve upon those flaws, they would rather remove it, reduce it, and control it into being the thing they want it to be. Like, everybody complains about knees and elbow spam. Knees and elbow spam still exists currently in the iteration of the game. There's nothing you can do about knees and elbow spam because the frames for startup on knees and elbows is too fast in context to what they are, and there's too much stun on them. But no one's complaining about the fact that there's too much stun, there's too few frames. They're complaining in some sort of generalistic way, and that is not giving a cohesive analysis to the situation they're being put in. It's just saying, overall, this thing is bad, I don't like it, remove it, or I'm gonna quit your game, instead of saying, hey, this thing is bad because this thing is too fast and I have no viable counter that is as easily accessible to me as it is accessible to them to do this thing. Like, I fought a cyborg yesterday. I played the game and I fought a Chris cyborg who only threw knees and elbows. She knee elbow spammed, and that's all she did. Why? Because they were fast enough to beat hooks up close, fast enough to beat uppercuts up close, did enough body damage to remove my stamina from me overall, just take away all my stamina, and were in the elbows come out faster than hooks, faster than jabs, have more stopping power than hooks and jabs, and they are at the same range that your jab is slower from, and your hook is not fast from that range either. So there is no viable counter to, there is no mechanical counter to an elbow from that range other than blocking, and blocking only goes so far when you're being kneed then elbowed, and because of that, players are more often to say, hey, just take it out, as opposed to trying to figure out why it works the way it works and try to mechanically re-engineer it to make it work in a way that's more practical. Like, knees from that close should do less damage and have no stun, and elbows from that close should do damage but should take longer to come up than, or it should be, yeah, they should probably take longer to come up since they have more damage than the hook, or they're probably around the same base damage as the hook. I need to look at the meta again, look at the spreadsheet again, but I think they have the same base damage as the lead hook, but they animate faster and they animate from a closer range than the lead hook. So if someone is standing orthodox to orthodox and they throw the lead elbow and you try to throw the lead hook, at best you trade, and the vulnerability on the lead hook is higher than the vulnerability on the lead elbow, so it's not a fair trade, you take more damage. It's things like that. It's looking at the thing more cohesively and creating a more practical space of understanding so that you can properly articulate what is actually the affliction of the game to improve the overall quality. And that's a conversation that most people who are in the space don't have, and the people who do have that, they often go too far in trying to break down and recreate systems that they have no understanding of, as opposed to just figuring out what is there and figuring out what could be changed from within what is there to become better than what it was or what it is currently. Like, I read the forum all the time and I see people coming up with these big verbose game designs that is just like, that design is more video gamey and mechanical and easy to poke holes in than what is actually there. What is actually there could be expounded upon to include a version of what you're trying to get out of it, but you removing what is there to put this 2-day old, you know, mechanic that you just created in your mind, and you have no idea of if it can actually be practically applied to a video game. This 2-day old mechanic you're thinking is going to fix all the problems and band-aid everything, which is actually counterproductive to the game's success as a whole, to be frank. So let me know in the comment section if you agree with any point in this video or disagree, or if you have some point that you want to talk about and we can further discuss and build upon that. I do plan on doing more specific to cases of scenarios, because I did speak to two different specific cases in this game that I hate about the game, with obviously the combination change and the what else did I talk about? The body punch change. I did speak to those two things, but I gave very specific one line, like literally those are just two individual instances, and the changes that were made to those two instances and how those changes could have been softer to encourage the game to progress in a direction that was more beneficial to everyone playing the game, not just the people who didn't want to learn what was currently available and didn't want to go through the process of evaluating the situation and relaying an articulate message to get that situation improved upon, instead of nerfed to the ground or completely removed and just be completely ineffective. So until next time, it's been Brian at the Apex Gamer channel. Hopefully I'm going to be doing more videos like this, and if you like more videos like this, please by all means stick around, because I will try my best to produce them as frequently as I can cohesively put together comprehensive narratives to perpetuate the feelings that are in my head, because shit gets kind of boggled up in my mind sometimes, and then once I play this game it gets ridiculously boggled and I can't properly relay it without it sounding just completely asinine. So until next time, it's been Brian at the Apex Gamer channel. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoy all the future videos and all the past videos. Go back and watch some of my UFC 1 content, some of my UFC 2 content. That shit was hilarious. I go back and watch that stuff all the time, so you should too. So until next time, see you guys soon.